Well, good morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. We are going to have two meetings this morning. First, we're going to meet as the Audit Oversight Committee. Then we will adjourn that and meet as the Executive Committee. So let's go ahead and get started as the Audit Oversight Committee. Clerk, please call the roll.
Whipper,
Here.
Elo Rivera,
Present.
Vargas is absent, Hall,
Here.
Moreno is absent, and Bush is absent, Goebel.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Clerk. We will go ahead and take non-agenda public comment. Commenters will have 2 minutes to comment on anything that is not on today's agenda. Clerk, do we have any public comments?
We do not, Chair.
All right, we will move on to the approval of the minutes. This action will approve the November 3rd, 2022 Audit Oversight Committee meeting minutes. Clerk, do we have any public comment on the minutes?
We don't.
All right, is there any?
I'll make the motion to approve.
All right,
Second.
we have a motion by Member Hall and a second by Vice Chair Goebel to approve the minutes of the November 3rd, 2022 Audit Oversight Committee meeting. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. That motion carries. We will move on to our discussion items. The first item is the Internal Audit Activity Update Report, and we'll get a report from Mr. Tabshuri. Mr. Tabshuri.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members of the Audit Oversight Committee. My name is Tawfiq Tabshuri, and I'm the Internal Auditor at MTS. This morning, I'm going to give a brief presentation on my audit activity from calendar year 2022 till the present. So for calendar year 2022, here's a listing of the audits that I worked on, and most of them have been completed. I'll quickly tell you why I selected the audit and what my findings and recommendations were. 3 of these reports that were completed, they've already gone to the board as consent items. They were provided in May, but I haven't had a chance to talk about them. So here I go. Travel expense claims. I picked this audit because it's susceptible to abuse. And so I'm happy to report that I didn't find any evidence of any abuse, that our processes for approving travel are tight, and then the payment processes and the review over receipts and stuff like that, they're quite tight. In fact, I thought they were a little bit too tight. Accounts payable, that was another due diligence type of audit that I did. It's really not a big concern in government. It tends to be a concern in small businesses that are having a problem paying bills. They tend to slow down payments. But I wanted to see how that function was working. And I hadn't done too many audits in the past of our finance department. And so that was kind of a little foray that I did. And I found that the function's working fine, and by working fine, I mean that we were making payments accurately and in a timely manner. And then I looked at things like exceptions and errors and duplicate payments. And for the most part, I didn't have any findings. IT security, I've done audits at MTS of IT security in the past. We established a new function here about 3 years ago. It's a very small department of 3 people. And then we bought a bunch of software, expensive software to kind of monitor the network and things like that. And so I wanted to really, my purpose behind this audit was to try to answer a couple of questions. One is, are we spending enough money on IT security? Is that kind of investment sufficient? And then 2, is the function working okay? And the first question is really hard to answer, just because it requires a lot of judgment. How much money is enough? But I ended up kind of deciding like, okay, compared to what we were spending in the past, I think that was enough for a government agency our size. And then how the function is working, I think anytime you establish a new function and then put in new systems, there are going to be some issues. Overall, I thought the function is working well, but I did have some recommendations for them to manage their workload a little bit better. I also did some work that wasn't exactly audits per se. There were more advisory or consultation work. There were a couple of policies that I reviewed and recommended changes to. Those are board policies. And that effort was in part of a broader effort that Karen kind of undergoes to make sure that board policies are current. And they will go to the board for approval in due course. I also did a little bit of work on the triennial audit, which we were subject to last year. Moving on to this year's audits and what I'm currently working on right now, I don't really want to go into too much detail about the findings, but I would like to explain to you again my rationale for selecting these audits, and I think that's, you know, as board members, that's the value that you can get out of me here. I'll take them maybe not in order, but two of them are records management and personally identifiable information. Those were audits that Sharon had requested of me. And I think the timing is fortuitous because MTS is moving to implementing Office 365, and that comes with a document management system, SharePoint. So we're going to be getting the IT system, but we need to have a good records management program in place. You have to kind of work on the policy and work on things like document retention schedules and storage. And so I think this is a good time for me to tackle it. Personally identifiable information, I think of it as a subset of records management or a special type of record that has legal protections associated with it, and it needs to be safeguarded against disclosure. So I'm tackling that as well. Another couple of related audits that are IT-ish in nature is our procurement of information technology and enterprise architecture. And for procurement of IT, I mean, some of the systems that we've bought over time, like Pronto and SAP, they're expensive, multi-million-dollar systems. And so what I wanted to do here is to look at the procurements a few years after we've bought them, sort of like think of it as back testing, like to answer the question, did we actually get what we wanted to get out of these systems? And if not, what were the areas that can maybe be improved upon for sort of future purchases or to improve the systems that we currently have? I can tell you that there's probably not many people that are doing this type of thinking in government and even at the federal level, because I reached out to a lot of people and, you know, to get their perspective on that. But I do think that there's a value to MTS of taking a look at it. Another one, which is even a little bit more academic, that many government entities don't really do, is what we call enterprise architecture. And that's really taking a holistic look at your IT infrastructure, and it encompasses related fields like business requirements analysis, IT procurement, and IT strategy. So what tends to happen with organizations over time is that they buy IT piecemeal, and then you end up accumulating a lot of IT stuff. And if you're not getting rid of it or reviewing it periodically, you just accumulated a lot of junk, and you've made your IT environment a lot more complex and unnecessarily so, which makes it a little bit more unstable and more expensive to manage. So those two, I'm doing one more audit of IT inventory controls. It's really more about making sure that IT assets like laptops and stuff that they're staying at MTS and not walking away, because they tend to be highly pilferable. So enterprise risk management is not an audit. It has to do with how I go about selecting areas to audit. And my thought was, if I have time to get to it, which I may not, but I want to use that work product to kind of help create more of an organizational wide enterprise risk management program. It's a little bit different than just paying claims and doing liability. It's more about each division at MTS and each department really kind of looking at its own risks and deciding, okay, these are the bad things that can happen. And I'm making sure that that type of thinking and analysis is making its way up to people like Sharon and Karen and others, so that they get a more granular feel, almost like a dashboard to how things are going. So finally, I do report to you on the fraud, any fraud that happened during the year. I run the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline. I get lots of calls every year. 99% of them end up having nothing to do with fraud, waste, or abuse. And sometimes, you know, occasionally I'll have one allegation that's serious and merits investigation. This year I had none. So, and that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tabashuri. Clerk, do we have any public comment?
We do not have any public comment.
Thank you, Clerk. Board discussion, Member Hall.
So on the Pronto, you were talking about that briefly. We were promised a lot more, put it mildly, when, the swiping of the credit cards and all this. Technology companies love to overpromise, underdeliver. How did you come up with how do you feel about that? Let's start there.
So I think, Pronto just barely got implemented. And so I haven't really waded into it. And I don't know that I will, because oftentimes what happens when you just put in a system, especially a big system like Pronto, there are going to be lots of kinks. And it's hard to know until maybe a year or two after it's been implemented, how many of those kinks are just part of the growing pains of putting in a new system, and how many of them are going to be just sort of permanent features that you desired, but you're not going to end up going because it's.
But we paid money to.
But we paid money too, and yeah. So
are you going to look into going after that money that we were overpromised and underdelivered?
I don't want to jump to conclusions right now because I really don't know much about how Pronto works from a technical point of view. My sense is that I'm going to take the universe of IT procurements and I'm going to select a few to take a deeper dive into. It does make sense for me to look at Pronto because it is a large and expensive system.
Right. Was it 35 million?
But I don't want to promise you that, yes, I'm going to look at Pronto now because there might be some other issues,
Chair, if I could, it was always envisioned that those functionalities were going to be eventually added to it. It's just that technology through the pandemic, while we were implementing the actual Pronto system, advanced faster than we thought it was going to be when we procured it. So now it's kind of a second phase of Pronto. And I know that that's something that everybody wants to see today. The board has authorized us to go ahead and give the task order to Init to add those functionalities. And so we will be doing that in this next phase. But the real promise of the Init system was that it would allow for those kind of add-ons after, as technology advanced, we were able to add them. There was never a promise that we would get that for that first initial
That's
amount of money.
understandable. I just want to make sure that, again, that they actually are coming in, first of all, and that there is the technology out there to do this. I mean, we can go to the bank and scan our credit card and, ATM card and we buy gas with that. It's all available now. So for them to say it's not available is disingenuous. I mean, I'm not trying to dwell on this. I'm just trying to say, you're talking about auditing this stuff. Well, I'm saying here's an audit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hall. Any further board discussion? Seeing none, this is an informational item, so no motion is necessary. Mr. Tabashuri, thank you very much for this report. Appreciate your work.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to item number 5, our next informational item, which is the Poon Group engagement letter for the fiscal year 2023 audit. And we will turn to Erin Dunn for our report on that.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you. Today I'm joined by Ken Poon and Coley Delaney from the Poon Group. You have been provided our engagement letters for the FY23 audit. They are similar in nature to all previous years, but we're happy to address any questions you might have.
Good morning, Chair. My name is Ken Poon. I'm the managing partner of the firm and also the technical partner on this engagement. And along with me today is Coley Delaney, who is the engagement partner. What we are going through today is also thank you for the opportunity, and it's kind of nice to be back in person, presenting our planning, scope of work, our responsibility, those standard to the Audit Oversight Committee here. So our presentation is pretty standard. What we are going through today is going through the scope of work that MTS has engaged our firm to perform. Going through the management responsibility, auditor's responsibility under the current professional standard. We'll also walk you through the approach to the audit, going through our interim audit procedures, audit results, and also Gatsby never rests, and also giving you a chance to look at what Gatsby pronouncement is going to implement during the current fiscal year. So the scope of work actually break it down into four different categories. The biggest categories here is the financial statement audit, which is the audit of the annual comprehensive financial report for MTS. That include all the components, which include the SDTC and SDTI. Also, the SDTC have a standalone employee benefit plan. So therefore, we also be able to, we are also looking at the financial statement audit is part of the one of the new Gatsby, one of the Gatsby pronouncement that's incorporated into the financial statement, which is Gatsby statement number 74. So the second category is the compliance audit, which is MTS heavily relied on grant federal assistance here. So MTS has expended more than 750,000 in federal expenditure. So therefore, we are required to go through the single audit under the uniform guidance. So, and there are a couple agreed upon procedures. One is on indirect cost. We look at the next year indirect cost rate and perform some agreed upon procedures so you can submit to FTA so that you can use that indirect cost rate. Also looking at the National Transit Database report, the data that you for the past fiscal year, the ridership information, some numbers that is timed out to the financial statement, making sure that those are inconsistent with your record. And then last but not least is a little compliance on the Transportation Development Act. The last two things is if there's anything that's come to our attention, we'll issue a management letter comments relating to internal controls matter. And also this year is big on Gatsby 96 on subscription-based information technology arrangement. It's a big task, and we are consistently working with Aaron to make sure MTS is properly implemented to your financial statement during the current fiscal year. So as management yourself, you're fully responsible for these financial statements by presenting these financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principle in the United States of America. The Governmental Accounting Standard Board is the standard setting bodies for state local government, which MTS is a municipal government where you are required to abide by those accounting principles. You also need to design, implement, and maintain proper internal control on both over financial reporting and compliance to make sure that these financial statements are fairly presented that are free from material misstatement due to fraud and errors. And also in preparing the financial statement, we also need to evaluate if there is any conditional event that may raise substantial doubt about MTS ability to continue as a going concern. Doesn't mean that the MTS has financial issue, but this is one of our responsibility to evaluate any event that may raise our doubt to your financial condition. As auditors, we are here to express our audit opinion on whether these financial statements are fairly present in all material respect in accordance with GAAP. Plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance. So we are only performing our test on an examination basis. We select samples and performing risk assessment. We consider internal control over financial reporting, but we are not here to audit your internal control and express our audit opinion on the effectiveness of internal control. However, if we identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiency in internal control, you'll definitely hear from us in writing. And also I'm listing out something kind of bullet point that is listed in your in the independence auditors report, because the standard actually further expand the auditor's responsibility. For example, we need to maintain professional skepticism. We need to assess risk, perform risk assessment, and evaluate your internal control and assessing risk. Obtain understanding of the internal control. Like evaluate the appropriateness of the accounting policy, and last but not least is also the evaluating your the MTS ability to continue as a going concern.
So I'll just briefly go over our audit approach, but we have a 4-phased audit approach, which consists of planning, the interim field work, which we'll be reporting on the results of those procedures in just a moment, a year-end phase and a reporting phase in the October-November timeframe. So the key piece of the planning approach, the planning phase for this year was evaluating the impact of upcoming GASB pronouncements. As Ken mentioned, GASB 96 is a large implementation that we're working on this year, and we're continuing to work on that. So in the April-May timeframe, again, I'll get to our results in just a minute, but that's basically our internal control evaluation and risk assessment procedures that we perform. Then we'll be back here in actually like about a month or so to get started on the year-end audit, where we're digging through the trial balance, validating numbers, performing compliance compliance testing and things like that. And then we'll work with Aaron on the reporting on the ACFR and get that to you in the November timeframe. That's our presentation for agenda item number 5. Are there any questions?
Very good. Thank you very much. Clerk, do we have any public comment?
We do not.
All right. Do we have any board discussion on this informational item? There is no need for a motion on that. And so seeing none, we will move on then to item number 6, which is another informational item, the interim audit. Please proceed with that item.
Okay, thank you. All right, so again, we call it the interim audit, but really it's our risk assessment and internal control evaluation phase. So the procedures that we performed, again, initial risk assessment, we update our understanding and perform walkthroughs and or tests of controls of what we consider significant transaction classes. And so for this year, those include financial reporting, which includes the budgeting process, journal entries, and reporting to the board. We looked at the revenue and cash receipt cycles, procurement and cash disbursements, the capital assets process, inventory, and payroll and human resources. So we confirmed our risk assessment and designed our audit procedures that we're going to be using to validate the actual numbers in our year-end phase of the audit, which is coming up. We do look at IT systems and controls and cybersecurity, and so I know that I'll be obtaining 2 FEECs updated reports on the cybersecurity as well. And then we also we did the related party testing. So basically with that, what we do is we look at vendors, vendor addresses and employee addresses and look for any places where those addresses interact and see if there's anything outside of just typical expense reimbursements and things like that. We also did a preliminary TDA compliance expenditure testing. We did the inventory count, and then we did for the pension plan, we did distribution testing, and we also reviewed the minutes of the full board, the executive committee, and the oversight committee. So based on these procedures that we performed, the internal controls for the selected transaction cycles appear to be properly designed, in place, and operating effectively in order to prevent and detect material misstatements. We didn't identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal control, compliance, or financial reporting. And I do just want to point out once again that we do not provide an opinion on the operating effectiveness of the internal controls. We just do those for our risk assessment procedures. Let's just go over that.
The new GASB standard, actually this year you do have 4 new GASB standard that you are required to be implemented, but GASB 96 is the one that is fully applicable to MTS. Is relating to the subscription-based IT arrangement. So in the past, IT industry has changed significantly. Instead of buying a perpetual license in using the IT asset, now is more on the subscription-based, kind of following the same accounting principle, just like leases that was adopted in last fiscal year. We are using the same accounting principle, recording the right to use the underlying IT asset, reporting on the face of financial statement, but also once you have a long-term subscription-based arrangement contract, you also need to record as a subscription liability. So therefore, it's just like in the past, like last year, you have a new asset called right to use a subscription asset, and then also a corresponding subscription liability on the and reported on the statement of net position, which is your balance sheet as of as of June 30, 2020. Three, but also because it's a comparative financial statement, we'll go back to 2021 and restating the 2021 numbers. So that's the new accounting principle, and we are more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment?
We do not.
Thank you, Clerk. We have some board discussion. We'll turn it over to Member Hall.
So just a quick question. You have the employee vendor addresses. Now, what did you find, first of all?
Well, typically, so we can look at.
Can you talk into the microphone?
Yeah, we can look at, it's typically, usually it is, expense reimbursement.
Okay, do you ever do any matching of corporate name, corporate officers versus names?
We don't go that far. It's just on the address side, is, for now, we have.
I mean, if I was gonna commit fraud, I think I'd use a different address, don't you?
Let me take that. It's also another way to look at it is we want to identify any related party transactions, because especially if there's any fraud or anything like that. This is one of the what I call the smell test, is to make sure that we can understand and identify any area where if an employee have a business that's using a similar address, we basically will pull it out and take a look at, see if there's any commonalities. Is the business actually legitimately provide goods and services to MTS, but majority of the like basically all of them, right? It's purely a reimbursement expense.
Right,
We have
okay.
not identified.
And again,
anything.
did you find any?
We have not identified
All right, thank you.
any issue.
Thank you very much, Member Hall. Seeing no further board discussion, we will thank you very much for the reports and your good work.
Thank you.
Appreciate your being here. Clerk, for the record, Member Moreno has indicated that she has joined us. She is in the conference room. Let's move on to item number 7. Is there any committee member communications or any other business? Seeing none, we will go ahead and adjourn this meeting of the Audit Oversight Committee. And we will immediately reconvene as the Executive Committee